91 million meals. That's what Feeding Our Future claimed to have served to hungry children between 2020 and 2022. FBI Special Agent Travis Wilmer wrote it plainly in a sworn affidavit. Almost none of this money was used to feed children. One surveillance site claimed 6,000 meals served per day. Cameras counted roughly 40 real visitors. One attendance roster submitted to the state listed 2,040 children's names. Only 20 matched real enrolled students. Another was generated on a website called listofrandomnames.com. The federal government ultimately estimated losses above $350 million, $250 million, stolen in broad daylight from a program designed to feed kids. To understand how this worked, you have to understand what America was doing in the spring of 2020. Schools closed overnight. 40 million children depended on free or reduced-price school lunches. The federal government needed a solution, fast. Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act in March 2020. Buried inside it, USDA waivers that stripped away nearly every verification requirement from the child nutrition program. For-profit restaurants could now claim federal child nutrition reimbursements. Off-site distribution required almost no verification. Reimbursement was based on self-reported meal counts. Amy Bach had founded Feeding Our Future in 2016 in Apple Valley, Minnesota. The pitch was simple and sympathetic. Connect immigrant and refugee communities in the Twin Cities with federal food assistance programs. In 2019, Feeding Our Future received $3.4 million in federal disbursements through the Minnesota Department of Education. Unremarkable. A mid-sized community nonprofit doing what it was supposed to do. MDE, the Minnesota Department of Education, acted as a so-called sponsor under the federal program. Sponsors received administrative fees for overseeing meal sites. More sites meant more fees. The incentive structure would matter enormously. Bach understood the new USDA waivers immediately. She began recruiting site operators, restaurants, community centers, mosques, and coaching them on how to apply for federal reimbursements through MDE. The paperwork was the product. By the end of 2020, Feeding Our Future had gone from one sponsor agreement with MDE to operating 299 meal sites across Minnesota. The money was flowing faster than anyone in St. Paul had ever seen. This was the peak of credibility. A nonprofit serving the immigrant community, federal backing, state partnership, and a narrative, hunger in a pandemic, that made scrutiny feel almost unkind. The first warning came before the pandemic even started. In July 2019, MDE officials identified implausible meal counts from Feeding Our Future sites, months before COVID loosened the rules. Former employees say Bach pressured anyone who raised questions within weeks. That's warning number one, ignored. Then, in February 2020, the IRS revoked Feeding Our Future's nonprofit tax-exempt status, a disqualifying red flag. MDE kept funding the organization anyway. Warning number two, ignored. By April 2020, just weeks into the pandemic, MDE regulator Emily Honer was already alarmed. She described the reimbursement requests coming from Feeding Our Future sites as incredibly high. Let's pull the actual numbers. In 2019, Feeding Our Future received $3.4 million. In 2020, after the waivers hit, disbursements began accelerating. By 2021, the organization was on track to claim nearly $200 million in a single year. That is a 58 times increase in under 2 years. Warning number three, ignored. The mechanism was straightforward. Feeding Our Future acted as MDE's administrative sponsor. It received an 18-cent per meal administrative fee on top of every reimbursement claim it processed. The more sites it opened, the more it earned. Feeding Our Future collected more than $18 million in administrative fees it was not entitled to. This wasn't incidental. The administrative fee structure was part of why Bach pushed to open as many sites as possible, fast. Now enter Salim Saeed. Saeed co-owned the Safari Restaurant and Event Center in Minneapolis, a real establishment that had earned roughly $600,000 per year before the pandemic. Under Bach's scheme, Saeed's Safari restaurant submitted claims to serve 5,000 children per day, 5,000, from a single restaurant that had generated $600,000 in an entire pre-pandemic year. The math alone should have been a stop sign. 5,000 children per day, every day. That's 1.8 million meals in a year, at roughly $3.68 per meal reimbursement. That's $6.6 million per year, from a $600,000 a year business. By late 2020, MDE officials in St. Paul had seen enough. They labeled Feeding Our Future severely deficient and moved to terminate the partnership. That decision, the right one, is where the story takes a stunning turn. In November 2020, Bach sued the Minnesota Department of Education in Ramsey County District Court. The allegation: MDE was slowing Feeding Our Future's applications because of race, national origin, color, and religion. A discrimination lawsuit. Lead federal prosecutor Joe Thompson put it plainly to the New York Times: allegations of racism can be a reputation or career killer. MDE's own Attorney General's office began warning of litigation risk. Oversight slowed. The OLA's 2024 special review, the definitive post-mortem by the Minnesota Office of the Legislative Auditor, found it explicitly: the threat of legal consequences and negative media attention affected MDE's decisions about the regulatory actions it did and did not take against Feeding Our Future. Catherine Thiessen, Special Reviews Director at the Minnesota Office of the Legislative Auditor, called it simply a systemic failure. That's warning number 4, and this one didn't get ignored quietly. It got litigated. A state court found no legal basis to stop the payments. Then, in spring 2021, Ramsey County District Judge John Guthman warned MDE there could be a real problem if it didn't resume processing applications. Then the judge held MDE in contempt. He ordered the state, the regulator trying to stop the fraud, to pay Feeding Our Future a $47,500 fine. Read that again. The state of Minnesota was ordered by a court to pay a fraudulent nonprofit $47,500 for trying to slow it down. The judicial system had become a mechanism to keep the money flowing. By spring 2021, Emily Honer had seen enough at MDE. She reported Feeding Our Future to the FBI. The referral went from MDE to USDA. USDA passed it to federal law enforcement. In February 2021, the Minneapolis FBI field office opened a formal investigation. Now, while the FBI was building its case, Bach was accelerating. Let's trace where the money actually went. When we followed the wires, they moved fast and moved wide. Bach personally received a $310,000 kickback. She funneled $600,000 to a partner through a shell company. Abdikerm Eidla, a Feeding Our Future employee who reported directly to Bach, collected more than $49,000 in documented bribes from a single site operator, Abdihakim Ahmed. Meanwhile, Abdi Salah, an aide to Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, pleaded guilty to wire fraud in connection with the scheme. The network had extended all the way into Minneapolis City Hall. Mayor Frey stated he was entirely unaware of Salah's activities, but Salah's guilty plea illustrated something critical. This wasn't a tight criminal ring. It was a sprawling network. 79 individuals would eventually be indicted. And only 3% of the funding granted to Feeding Our Future meal sites was actually spent on food. 3%. Where did the rest go? Luxury goods, real estate, overseas wire transfers to accounts the U.S. cannot seize, a Porsche Panamera, designer handbags. As of early 2025, less than $75 million had been recovered, less than 30 cents on every stolen dollar. Now there's a question that state officials are still asking about a competitor. Kara Lohman founded Partners in Nutrition in St. Paul, operating a similar sponsor model to Feeding Our Future. Days after the January 2022 FBI raid on Feeding Our Future, agents executed a search warrant on Partners in Nutrition as well. An anonymous PIN employee whistleblower told the FBI that at least 60% of PIN's sites were fraudulent. A witness described five-figure employee bonuses distributed by PIN in October 2021, described as intended to keep staff silent. And yet, as of mid-2026, no criminal charges have been filed against Partners in Nutrition or Cara Lohman. That discrepancy, a rated organization, a 60% fraud allegation, five-figure silence bonuses, and zero charges, is one that Minnesota state officials are now publicly questioning. The email that may yet end Partners in Nutrition could still be working its way through a federal grand jury. But back to Bach. Through all of 2021, the claims kept coming. The FBI was watching. The surveillance footage was accumulating. Sites claiming thousands of meals a day with 40 people showing up. That's warning number 5, 6, 7, all documented in real time. The fake attendance rosters were getting bolder. One submitted to MDE included 2,040 names. Only 20 matched real students enrolled anywhere in the district. A second roster, submitted under a different site, was traced by investigators back to listofrandomnames.com. By December 2021, the FBI had enough. 25 coordinated search warrants were prepared. More than 200 law enforcement personnel across 4 agencies were briefed. They were going in, at dawn, in a Minnesota January 20, 2022. Sub-zero temperatures across the Twin Cities. At dawn, more than 200 law enforcement personnel from the FBI, IRS Criminal Investigation, U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and U.S. Marshals descended on more than a dozen locations simultaneously. 25 coordinated search warrants. Agents left Feeding Our Future's St. Anthony office with Bach's laptop, $13,000 in cash, and boxes of incriminating documents. The Star Tribune had it on their front page by morning. One headline that day quoted the FBI affidavit. Almost none of this money was used to feed children. The city woke up to the scale of what had happened. 8 months of grand jury work followed. On September 20th, 2022, U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger walked to a podium in Minneapolis and announced federal charges against 47 defendants, the largest pandemic fraud indictment in American history. Attorney General Merrick Garland called it the country's largest pandemic relief fraud scheme. The DOJ press release named the charge explicitly: wire fraud, money laundering, bribery, across a network touching Minneapolis, St. Paul, and overseas bank accounts. 65 convictions would follow over the next 3 years, nearly 60 through guilty pleas. But the biggest names, Bach and Saeed, went to trial. The first group trial began April 22, 2024, for 7 Feeding Our Future defendants before Judge Nancy Brazel. Then, 11 days in, something almost unimaginable happened. June 2, 2024, conspirators had surveilled and GPS-tracked juror number 52, a young woman of color, learned where she lived, and delivered a Hallmark gift bag stuffed with $120,000 in cash to her front door. The juror reported it immediately. Andrew Luger called it a chilling attack on our justice system. 5 suspects were subsequently indicted. All eventually pleaded guilty. The main trial of Amy Bach and Salim Saeed began in early 2025. 6 weeks of testimony. Prosecutors laid out the fake rosters, the surveillance footage, the kickback flows, the shell companies, the $18 million in fraudulent administrative fees. Salim Saeed sat at the same defense table. His safari restaurant had claimed to serve 5,000 children per day. Prosecutors showed the jury the surveillance footage. They showed the $600,000 annual revenue. They let the math speak. March 19, 2025. The jury deliberated for approximately 5 hours. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, conspiracy, bribery, both Bach and Saeed. Acting U.S. Attorney Lisa Kirkpatrick's statement was stark. The defendants falsely claimed to have served 91 million meals, for which they fraudulently received nearly $250 million in federal funds. That money did not go to feed kids. Sentencing came on May 21, 2026. Before Judge Brassel pronounced sentence, Bach addressed the court. "It was never my goal to do this. I failed to protect people. I really believed in the work I was doing." Judge Brassel was not moved. She looked directly at Bach and said, "This was a fraud vortex and you were at the epicenter of it. 500 months. That is 41 years and 8 months in federal prison." Bach was ordered to pay $243 million in restitution. The CBS News headline said it plainly. Amy Bach, sentenced to 500 months, the longest sentence in the Feeding Our Future case. So how did $250 million, at minimum, disappear from a program designed to feed children? The answer is a machine with 3 interlocking parts, and every part failed simultaneously. Part 1, the USDA waivers. The Families First Act stripped away on-site verification, residency requirements, and income checks, all at once. Reimbursement ran on the honor system. The program was designed for speed in a crisis. Speed, it turned out, was a vulnerability. Part 2, the lawsuit. Bach discovered something powerful, that alleging discrimination against a regulator in a politically sensitive environment could function as a legal off-switch for oversight. The OLA confirmed it, the court enforced it, the state paid for it. This is the template other fraudsters are now studying. File a discrimination suit, slow the regulator with litigation risk, collect money while the lawyers argue. It worked here for 2.25 billion. Part 3. The SBA estimated over $200 billion in potential COVID-19 relief fraud nationwide. $200 billion. Feeding Our Future, the single largest individual scheme, represents roughly 1/8% of the total estimated loss. Less than $75 million of the Feeding Our Future money has been recovered. The rest is in overseas accounts the United States cannot touch, or it was already spent. A Porsche, designer goods, wire transfers to Nairobi and Dubai, the architecture of permanent theft. The USDA has since tightened some waiver rules. Congress has passed modest oversight provisions, but the fundamental tension, speed versus verification in a crisis, has not been resolved. The next pandemic waiver will face the same choice. Catherine Thyson's report named it a systemic failure, not Amy Bach's personal failure, though Bach is the one serving 41 years, a systemic failure. One that existed before her and will exist after her sentence is complete. Nearly $250 million, meant for hungry children, gone, and as of today, less than 30 cents of every stolen dollar has been recovered. The USDA waivers that made this possible were never designed for oversight, they were designed for speed. And right now, other organizations are operating under looser rules than Feeding Our Future ever faced. The question isn't whether this will happen again, it's which nonprofit name we don't know yet. If you think executives who weaponize civil rights law to shield a fraud deserve more than a fine, or if you think the system failed before Bach ever signed a single claim, tell me exactly that in the comments, and subscribe, because the next one is already hiding in plain sight.